Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Harry here. Harry, you're somebody that's been really innovative in the scent space for quite some time, and the creations that you've brought to the industry have really shaped what it is today. And you've really refined the kind of taste that people expect from home scents and from candles. And what because of the way that you've went about creating these, and you built a really great brand that's been a symbol for quality, and it's been seen all over QVC and other places. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story. Harry, where did your passion for kind of entrepreneurship, business leadership, and this like scent space begin? Like, was this something you had when you were young? Like, how did this passion kind of start?
Well, Fen came a little bit later on, but I started my first company when I was 15. So I think the entrepreneurial side of me blossomed early. It was by accident. I'll tell the story, which I don't very often tell, Ben. But at 15 years old, my brother had just gone to college. He came through home. He threw a red sweatshirt in the wash, and he ruined a napkin that had been given a gift to my mother. It was called by a French company called Porto. And Porto was the bed linens, for example, that Mrs. Kennedy slept on in the White House. So they were very special. And he went to replace them because my mother said, well, you ruined them, go replace it. And they were $45 a napkin. Today they would go for, they're about $300 a napkin. So it tells you back then they were very expensive. So not being able to afford to replace it, my family was in textiles, and he took some fabric and cut them up and made some napkins for my mother. And the next thing you know, we had my mother's friends saying, could I have a set? Could I have a set? And we started making extra money, and it blossomed. My brother was in college, and I was cutting them all by hand at the time. I literally walked around. I know you can't see this, but I walked around literally with my fingers looking arthritic for about a year. But one day, someone said, you should take this to Bloomingdale's. And not knowing at 15 there or 17, my brother, so he saw us and he bought the line for
Huh.
Bloomingdale's for all stores. And the next thing you know, we were in Penny, and it just grew bigger and bigger. And that's how my first voyage into entrepreneurship started. But I learned the biggest lesson in that first business. And the biggest lesson is never lie. And I'm so glad I learned it early on. And the reason being is when we were going into J.C. Penney, we were so excited. J.C. Penney, they gave us an opening order of $48,000. Now, back then, we got an order for that for Saks. So we're like, they put us in their catalog, not stores. But they said, if it hits, be prepared. They put two items in their catalog. And one was a tablecloth that had pins with bows on the side in a French Provençal fabric that we printed ourselves. And the other one was made out of leather that you would use in a car seat. And we stamped out of it saying bon appetit or a fork and knife. They're very sort of French and modern feeling. Again, I was 15, I'm 62, so a long time ago. But one thing J.C. Penney said was, are you on computer? This is just when computers were starting. We still had fax paper that we would fax on and it would disappear off that. He said, of course we're on computer. Well, it hit. And every 2 weeks, we were getting reorders of $250,000, $350,000. And it just kept coming in. And we were getting behind. We had every family member in the warehouse. We had an empty warehouse, my family we were using. We had my mother, this sort of woman who got her hair done every week was at a sewing machine for the napkins. It was, and you'd load up a J.C. Penney truck, and then you'd realize you were one short. They called up to check on the orders, and they could hear the papers rattling in our notebook because we weren't on computer. And so they asked for a big meeting, and we had the big meeting, and I realized never lie, because as J.C. Penney said, if you just said you weren't on computer, we would have worked with you. We love your product. But because of that, and because we're so backlogged, we can't work with you anymore. And so we learned our first lesson, never lie.
Wow. So how did you kind of like, prepare for the internet age? I mean, I think you started in, your scent business more in 1992. How did you like make sure that you were innovative in the internet age while, being a product category that wasn't, a tech product category?
So this was the 80s. So in I think it was 87, I then decided to go to Wall Street. All my friends were doing, these wonderful things. Now, when I owned the company that I started when 15, you could imagine that it had a lot of press, a lot of PR. So I had this big book filled with all the press, 3 pages in Town and Country magazine, People magazine, all this, because for 15 and 17-year-old entrepreneurs selling at Bergdorf's and Neiman's and Saks, et cetera. And even Marvin Traub, who was the chairman of Bloomingdale's, who launched us, we were in his book that he wrote about himself and his career. So I went to Wall Street because all my friends were then, doing fantastic on Wall Street. And I remember the first meeting in finance, I met with a managing director, a senior managing director in finance that a friend introduced me to. And I walked into his office. He was reading the newspaper, smoking a cigar, my story. And he said, well, you know what? I don't think this is a fit. And I said to myself, I can get up and walk out of the room, or I can literally grab that excuse me, I hope I can say the damn newspaper out of his hand and get his attention. So I did. I literally ripped the newspaper out of his hand. I said, give me 3 minutes. And if in 3 minutes you still don't like me, I'm happy to leave. I gave him the book with not only all the press, but the orders from JCPenney, et cetera. And they hired me. And a year later, I became a managing director. And it taught me, because I worked under a man named Ace Greenberg. I called him Alan, who's probably one of the most famous chairmen of finance at Bear Stearns. He taught me so many ways of, the rules of the business. And I also got to learn the internet world because finance was going quickly on a computer, and that's all you used back then. So it really exposed me to so much that when I went to my next stage, which was Scent, finally, it prepared me for that.
Did you think you wanted, like, were you kind of wanting to be entrepreneurial at that time too, or were you wanted something different? You need experience more like the world of finance before going kind of back to it?
I'm neurotically controlling. So, for example, if I walk in my living room and a pillow's not in the right place, I go over and the curtain is a little off. So, for me, an entrepreneur is a person who absolutely is involved in every aspect of their business. Now, when I was 15 and we started, it's called Simon's middle name, my brother's middle name. When we started, we did everything from washing the bathrooms and toilets ourselves to eating McDonald's out of the garbage can at 8 o'clock at night because it was too tired to go out because you worked long hours. So an entrepreneur is a person who really will do anything that's needed in a business. And while I've never had to eat a McDonald's French fry out of a garbage bin since then, I can clean a mean toilet to this day. So my answer to you is that spirit, once you've been bit, stays in you.
Right. So how did you kind of come up with your idea, Harry, for like what you wanted to build next in the scent space? Like, how did you come up with your own angle and create something different? Like, what was the niche how did you ideate this niche?
So life is built on, you know, opportunities that come along that if you don't have your eyes open, you don't see them. So remember, the first one was a table and bed linen company that happened by accident because of a red sweatshirt. My wife and I were getting married. She worked at Lehman Brothers, I worked at Bear Stearns, and we wanted a change in our life, and we didn't know what it would be. And my brother is an interior designer, and he's a well-known one, and does worldwide projects. But when he was finished with a project of a client he liked very much, he gave them their own scented candle because he thought to spend all this money on interior design and not take care of your keenest sense, we smell before we do anything, was a shame. So we had these ladies in the beginning. They were well-known ladies. Yasmin with Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, whose mother was Rita Hayworth and father was Prince Ali Khan. And he was so tired of going to a dinner and having the person to the left and right saying, oh, could you make a candle for me? No, I only make my own candles. So when we were getting married and Laura and I wanted to change, he said to my wife, of course, not me, we're still brothers. We still have that friction relationship when you're brothers. But he said to my wife, if you'd like this as a present, I don't want to do candles anymore. So we said, yeah, let's try it. It had a cult following. If you opened up a book on Hubert de Givenchy in his own book, you'd be reading how he used our candles. It had a cult following. And we said yes. At the exact same time, we said yes, because there's a lot of luck in entrepreneurship. At the exact same time, there was a woman named Rosemary Bravo. She became very famous for becoming the chairwoman of Burberry and turning Burberry all around. But back then, she was leaving I. Magnin a store that no longer exists in San Francisco, to become the president of Saks. And a friend of ours in San Francisco said, you must go see the Slatkin candles. And we became her first project. And I had read all the books on Estee Lauder and Helena Rubinstein and Charles Reston, who founded Revlon. And I want to be out of the home floor. I want to be a lipstick, an instant purchase in cosmetics. Because back then, home was only on the Saks 8th floor, which means you either forgot why you went there or you needed oxygen by the time you got there. So she launched us in a full shop on the 3rd floor. Her couture shop is a trade magazine for the industry. And they did a full page, and everyone woke up and said, ooh, I want a home fragrance. So we were approached and ended up doing the home fragrance for Ralph Lauren, NARS Cosmetics, Laura Mercier, Chopard, Christian Dior, Tory Burch, Vera Wang. And what happened through that is we grew Slatkin and Company at Saks and then Bergdorf's and Neiman's and Nordstrom's and Harrods. But we changed the marketplace by putting out brands for the Ralphs, et cetera, and changed the whole home fragrance landscape. We did it for cash flow, but it ended up changing the whole home fragrance landscape.
Huh. Did you think at the time that the home fragrance landscape had so much more potential to grow? I mean, there was a certain industry that was there at the time, but now it's very different. I mean, it's a staple of so many homes today. It's a staple of businesses. It's something people don't think about as an afterthought. It's really a priority. Like, did you see that kind of potential when you were building it?
First of all, my ego will tell you that I did that, which is what I'm going to explain to you. So I created what that is, my wife and I. But I didn't see it at that point because I was only in luxury. So when you're in luxury, it's a small fragment of the whole entire world, right? Think of Vuitton, think of Hermes, think of Gucci. It's a world that caters to a certain level, especially when you get into the expensive items. So about 7 years into the business, we were the darlings of the business. So we were on everything from Oprah Winfrey every Christmas show, Anna Wintour in Vogue. We were the first candle to be written about. Started a home fragrance brand within Bath and Body Works. The design team, of course, do all these things with pink feathers on, pink marabou, thinking he was coming to ask me about Victoria's Secret. Didn't really know about Bath and Body Works. Again, I was a luxury snob. But he came in a half-hour meeting, spent 2 hours talking about the potential of home fragrance. He had a small fledgling home fragrance business called White Barn Candle because he lives on White Barn Lane in Columbus, Ohio. And it couldn't get off the ground. And I went to see it and Bath and Body Works. And as a luxury snob, I kind of fell back and I think got dizzy because it was talking down to the consumer. And what I loved about Les Wexner when we spoke, he didn't talk down to the consumer. We sold our company to Limited Brands. I went as the president of home for Limited Brands. Bath and Body Works, my concentration. And my goal was to grow it to 1 billion. And 5 years later, we got it to 1.3 billion. And today it's the largest home fragrance company in the world at 2.3 billion. But I stepped down after year 5.5.
So after this kind of period where you were, working with Les and you're building up, the fragrance area there, you decided to, step down. What were you thinking of kind of doing next at that point? And did you feel like you accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish in that space because you went right back at it?
I think an entrepreneur has a huge ego. That's what drives you, but also a great insecurity. I started with my best friend, Tommy Hilfiger. We bought a fashion brand called Belstaff. Our fashion is very different than home fragrance. And after 3 years, we both stepped down and sold it to a third partner, which at that time owned Jimmy Choo, they owned Melody. We sold our portion back. And after that, I thought I'd retire. Huh. Little did I know that I was not going to retire and go back into fragrance again. And I am doing that now. So I'm back in home fragrance.
So you recently, I think, opened up, and entered into 28,000 different doors in Q1 of this year. What's kind of your plan now in fragrance? Like, what do you see it's missing, and how do you plan on tackling that?
Okay, so you want the whole story how I got back into home fragrance. So what happened, I watched, when I was 15 years old, I watched HSN, Home Shopping Network, which Barry Diller had just started. And I was so fascinated that I was watching one day and they had a reindeer made out of wood. When you lifted its tail, it pooped peanut M&Ms. And back then, they used to show you how many they sold. They sold 38,000 poop and reindeer. So I said, someday I'm going to figure out how to go on. So during my growth at Bath and Body Works, I used QVC. I went on it. It was so successful that we had to put signs in our stores as seen on or sold out at QVC. And it was so successful that Les Wexner had me open the investors conference talking about QVC. So when I stepped down from my goal of getting it to a certain level, and I was not I was doing Bell staff, I stopped doing QVC. Obviously, I was no longer the face of the brand. So my wife was having lunch with the number two at QVC at Cipriani in Manhattan and said, "Would you like to join?" And his name was Doug Howe, and he was a dear friend, still is. And I said, "Sure." So I got on to lunch, and at the end of lunch, he said, "You know, we've never replaced your home fragrance brand. I was the big number one home fragrance brand on QVC. We'd love to have you back." So I thought he was being flattering. My wife kicked me under the table. She did not like me retired. I spend way too much money to be retired. And so I said, "If you're serious, let me know," thinking he wasn't. And I woke up Monday and QVC relaunched, and we're now their number one home fragrance brand, actually, and one of their top growing brands at the whole brand. And that's how it started to happen. Then we went to Kohl's because Doug Howe left to go to Kohl's, and we ended up doing Kohl's. And then friends of ours founded Home Depot, who we met through mental health, because my wife and I have a foundation in mental health. And so we actually then ended up doing Home Depot. And that just kept leading and leading and leading to, where we are today, CVS, Walmart, Dollar General. So we've grown the business. So my idea of I could do this leisurely, I could just do QVC is no, I'm an entrepreneur. I can't say no. They dangle an idea in front of me, and as an entrepreneur, I get very, very swayed. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. Just the last question that I have, Harry. So at this
Sure.
point in your life, what do you hope to accomplish? Like, what are some things that you think you haven't done yet, or that you would like to be able to do, or areas you like to explore? Like, what do you want to accomplish now?
Now we're in Bath and Body as well. It it's the same thing that happened at Bath and Body Works. I thought at that time they were talking down to their consumer. And here I'm seeing, as I go into all of these different channels of distribution, that the brands that they've been carrying have been talking down to the consumer. The consumer is very savvy. It's why I love being on Oprah Winfrey's Christmas shows and her loving our candles. And it's why so many celebrities, from the palaces in England to the White House here, it's why we've been in them, because we don't talk down to the consumer on any level. I work with master perfumers at the fragrance houses. I work with the best of the best. Mine are all essential oils. And I think my opportunity is to one more time put a chicken in every pot, just like the president had said during a difficult time in our economy way back when. I think it was Harry Truman. Is for me, I want a candle in every house, and I want it to be mine.
That sounds good. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and definitely excited to see what you're building now grow and scale to so many different people and have an impact on their lives. So definitely wishing you much success, Harry. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, very nice of you. And thank you for having me, and thank you for exposing me to your audience. I listened to you, so it was a great pleasure for me. Thank you.